This from Jimmy crystallises what I tried and possibly failed to articulate a moment ago, and then we'll go to Josephine Stroud on the phone. Jimmy writes, this is diplomacy time, James. Keep the school bully happy, but don't side with him. You can't side with a liar. What's the point? Starmer has to play the straightest of straight bats and use every trick in his book. That if that means dull statesman, then so be it. I'm glad it's him, as I can't think of any recent leader who would have stood a chance of pulling this off. Pulling what off? The idea of keeping the bully sweet while simultaneously acting in the national interest with regard to Europe. So looking east and west at the same time. The problem with that is you could get whiplash.
So if I sound a little bit dazed, it's because I'm a Canadian and I was up late last night watching the results.
Wow.
Yeah, well, it's real for us over there. So in answer to your question, ultimately, at the end of the day, when the chips fall, he's going to have to look east.
Yeah.
Because they are the only reliable partners we've got. Right? You need to have somebody.
Is it that simple? Is it that simple?
At the end of the day, they're the only ones that you can count on because they're the only ones who rely on rules.
But they look at us.
He could have a bad burrito and declare war.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like he's completely, and the trouble is, the United States, by electing him, have shown that they are completely, that they are willing to be swayed by the whims of somebody who, if they have a bad burrito, is willing to go to war.
But he could have a good burrito and give us something devoutly to be wished for. By the same token,
and then take it away the next day when he has a bad burrito. But
a lot of burritos.
Yeah, but it's America. But. And this was kind of my conversation with your researcher.
Yeah.
All of our entire military is tied into American equipment. So all he has to do is say, okay, we're not going to support you anymore with the maintenance of your equipment. And over the next 6 months, all of our stuff just grinds to a halt. And the only thing that we really have to offer the European Union, i.e. our military support, falls apart. So we have to ride two horses for the next little while.
So you're doing
without spending any money.
You're doing a postponement of the decision. They need to prepare for a detachment, a more meaningful detachment, but they can't do it yet for the reasons that you highlight. But I mean, he may be gone in 4 years. I know it's they've already floated the possibility of.
It doesn't matter who comes next.
Does it not?
It's over. It's over.
The reliability is broken even if someone reliable moves back into the White House. The presumption of reliability is gone forever.
It turns out the French were right.
What about?
About how to treat the Americans.
Oh, I see.
And
You're going way back.
How to treat the Americans and how to handle your own sovereignty. At the end of the day, you do need to have your own economy, you do need to have your own military, you do need to have your own energy policy. End of story. Even if it is a little bit less efficient.
You can't be too reliant on anybody else, but in this case on the biggest player in town. What about the? I mean, what does it look like in terms of specifics? Do we? I mean, the state visit, is that just what you'd describe as a meaningless bauble? You give Trump something that he wants because he's a massive man-child. The Open, if they could pull strings and deliver the Open to Turnberry, he'd be delighted. Is it Turnberry? Well, anyway, to his golf course, he'd be absolutely delighted. So you do these things.
Nothing that costs us money.
Right.
Nothing.
But what about integrity?
Nothing that costs us our ability to pivot.
What about integrity? It costs us integrity.
Integrity is the luxury of people who've made provision for it.
That's a nice line. And Mark Carney has integrity.
Mark Carney is in a very different position. Canada is, by declaring that the whole 51st state thing put Canada in an existential position.
Yeah.
By declaring that whole thing put, that's it. That was him stating that his intention is to make Canada no longer exist. So that and Canada is in a very different position to Britain.
Of course,
Canada has to take the kind of the communication strategy of a small to medium sized dog. So it's like cuddles and gentle nudging, and if that doesn't work, or if then they're threatened, they have to transition automatically to ultraviolence.
Oh, okay.
And that's it.
That's elbows up
that's all
or
they
elbows
have.
out. Yes.
Yeah, but with Britain, you have a much broad, because you're not physically connected and because you're also bigger, you have a much broader spectrum of ways that you can work.
Well, that's a slightly upbeat analysis. Final question. If Donald Trump had never said anything about Canada in the last 6 months, would Pierre Poilievre be Prime Minister now?
He'd have a diminished voter share, but he probably would be Prime Minister.
It's incredible, isn't it? He has handed the premiership to Mark Carney.
The guy is...
Or gift-wrapped it, at least.
It's unbelievable. I mean... I'm lost for words. That doesn't happen.
Politics, eh? I was doing the football all weekend after my team had a nightmare in Southport. But politics sometimes delivers similarly roller coaster style scenarios, and this is one of them. 200-seat majority mooted just a few months ago, and now he's lost his own seat. The leader of the Canadian Conservative Party, and as Josephine Stroud says, a man who I sense is not often lost for words, but he is now.
One of the lessons I think Starmer can learn from Carney is that people do actually respect you if you take a position. Yeah.
Yes.
And in answer to the other question you posed, why is Canada a smaller country, population, smaller economy? Why can't Starmer do the same thing? I mean, the elephant in the room is obviously Brexit. We are hemmed in by Brexit. If we move towards Europe, Starmer has got his eye on the polls. He'll be looking at the polls at the moment. They don't make great reading for Labour really at the moment.
Worst ever, I think, for government to come in with the sort of majority that Labour had in its current polling. But look at what Canada also teaches us about how much you can rely on polling 6 months out from a general election.
Well, no, exactly. So he's hemmed in, and there is no middle ground here. There is no middle ground dealing with somebody like Trump. He cannot continue to walk this tightrope, and he's going to edge towards Europe, in my view. Incidentally, on the Ukraine thing, I can't help but wonder what we might be doing something behind the scenes and saying to the Americans, look, there is absolutely no way that we're going to bank this preposterous deal that you're proposing. I know it's outside the ambit of what we're discussing. But
no, it's not, though. It's not, because it will be part of this new pact that the UK is preparing to sign with the EU. Ukraine will be, the territorial integrity of Ukraine will be very much front and centre. In a way, it's the perfect example of the thing that you can't do today, but you're preparing to do it tomorrow. But what noises do you make in the meantime? Do you see what I mean? So we are going to have to replace the dependence upon America, but we can't replace it overnight. So what noises do you make in the meantime?
Yeah, and the other thing is we've got to hope he actually does leave at the end of his term, and that somebody with a head on their shoulders is going to take over, that we're going to be able to do business with. So whatever we do now, we can't ostracise the Americans completely.
Well, then you're back to my other question, which is how long does Trumpism last after Trump?
And whether or not they get in at the next election. I mean, if we're dealing with the JD Vance, in many ways it could be worse. So yeah, I take that. I mean, my overwhelming emotion is one of frustration. That Brexit, I mean, colours to the mast. I'm one of the most anti-Brexit people you would ever meet, and it's straitjacketed Starmer. He can't do anything, and it's one of the consequences of Brexit that none of us would ever really have predicted, that it's having such a huge impact on our foreign policy and our latitude when it comes to dealing with what is, in fact, an international crisis. We can't act with a clear voice, and we're sort of.
I mean, it is
diminished.
In a way. It's a self-inflicted wound, not dissimilar to making Donald Trump president. The British equivalent of Trump is Brexit. Everyone seems to agree about that, regardless of where they sit on the spectrum of approval or disapproval. And if you still think Brexit was a good idea, chances are you still think Donald Trump is doing a bang-up job in the United States of America, which means you're focusing rather more on feelings than on facts. But we all do that at various points in our lives. That's the problem, isn't it? Is that we've done this crazy thing. That's why I quite like, for all the teasing that I'm receiving, including Andrew Marr's producer saying, go on, do the three-legged race thing again. I quite like my three-legged race analogy. Keir Starmer is hobbled, but he can't unhobble himself for reasons, political reasons, geopolitical reasons. And of course, the support that Farage is currently enjoying is Brexit 2.0. It's a huge sort of vote of unhappiness with the way things are. They're all as bad as each other. Let's just set fire to it and do something completely different. And nobody in the British media has got the honesty to admit that the last time they encouraged the population to do that, we blew off one of our own feet. If the polls stay where they are as the next general election comes around, the country's going to blow off the other one. But hey-ho, all of the people encouraging you to do it, whether they're sitting behind microphones in radio studios or writing op-eds in the Daily Mail, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. Just as the richest supporters of Donald Trump and his sycophants in the media, they're not going to be suffering from the shelves slowly emptying as ships from China stop coming to the United States. Seattle port, I think, empty overnight. Unprecedented scenes. But if you control the media, then you control the narrative.
I just wanted to answer your question about a British Mark Carney.
Yes.
I think that the Mark Carney had a no-brainer deal. He had to be antagonistic, severely antagonistic towards Trump to win the election. Keir Starmer does not need to be that.
Okay.
But I do think, my current thought is this. I used to think that Keir Starmer is hobbled. As you said, he really cannot take the risk to antagonize Trump. I'm beginning to change my mind. I think he has a window between now and the state visit when he can afford to do that. After that, it's too late. If he takes a decision now to realign towards Europe in terms of a defense arrangement, which hopefully eventually leads to a more closer trade arrangement, which he needs to have if he's going to have any growth in our economy, I don't think Trump is going to come on a state visit and try to be nasty to us. So I think he's got a window between now and then to take advantage of it. And he's got to be brave about it.
And what does advantage look like?
Sorry?
What does advantage look like? I mean, we've got this window of leverage. What do we use it for?
Carney has shown that you can take on Trump, and he will. He doesn't take on people who takes him on, and he wants to be in good book with the British. He wants to be liked by the British.
I'm not so sure. I mean, he does today, but it doesn't.
Maybe not, but I think the state visit is a big thing for him.
It's huge.
And he cannot come here looking nasty to this country if we have done some deals with Europe in the meantime.
I mean, or you threaten him with taking it away.
Yeah, I mean, we have a leverage now, and after that, it's too late. That's what my feeling is.
Okay. I mean, there is something there. It does feel like a huge piece on the board, doesn't it, the state visit? It clearly meant so much to him. These what could be construed as meaningless baubles from the outside, from the inside are not. His desperation to win the Nobel Peace Prize because Barack Obama did. And so much of Trump's animus seems to be a kind of white supremacist hatred of Barack Obama ever being permitted to become president in the first place. So he clearly values these things hugely, much more than other traditional assets that a president might pursue or seek. But I mean, but then the game changes after the state visit, which is probably going to be sooner rather than later. It has achieved the impossible of making me feel sorry for the king. Actually, poor old King Charles. He's not been well. He's in recovery. He's not young. He's done a pretty good job taking over from his mum after, looking like he was to be the perpetual bridesmaid and never the bride. And now he's got to entertain this man in his own house. Absolutely awful infliction. I grant you. The trade-off's pretty healthy. The quid pro quo for a king, for an actual king who gets to drive around in a golden carriage, and the only price he has to pay is occasionally breaking bread with unpleasant individuals. But still, I feel sorry for the king. Viv, thank you. Some nice answers to the question of what would a British Mark Carney look like. Some of you taking it less seriously than others, it has to be said. Ed Davey is the most the most popular answer. Ed Davey. What would a British Mark Carney look like? Ed Davey. Except Ed Davey's not likely to be in power anytime soon. Similarly, Rory Stewart. And I think Ian was yanking my chain when he said Jeremy Corbyn, but with Jeremy Corbyn fans, you can never be entirely sure. Hugh Grant in Love Actually is the second most popular answer. So it answers to the question of what would a British Mark Carney look like in terms of standing up to Donald Trump. The most popular answer is the Liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey. And the second most popular answer is a fictional character in a Richard Curtis film, namely Hugh Grant in Love Actually.